Welcome everybody to the relaunch of the Haulin Assets podcast. The last 7 years have been absolutely crazy. There's been some really good times as we've grown. There's been some challenging times as we've really hit the worst freight market that anybody can remember in a really long time. And in this episode of the podcast, we're going to reminisce a little bit. We're going to talk about why I originally started the podcast. And then we're going to talk about how it's going to stay the same and also how it's going to change. So Craig, you ready to jump in?
Let's do it.
I'm Chris. This is my 7th year owning a trucking company and hosting the Haulin Assets podcast. When I first started, I thought I knew trucking. Turns out I had no idea how much I would learn. Welcome back to Haulin Assets 2.0, where I take you through the good and the bad, the ups and the downs of being an owner-operator.
Indeed, welcome back, everybody. Happy to be here. Chris, you know what I noticed the most from your little intro there?
What's that?
The words, the last 7 years.
Hi. Crazy, huh?
We've been doing this podcast for a long time. I did a podcast for 11 years on a totally different subject, and people would say, like, you just, jaws on the floor. I can't believe you got something to last that long. We are well on our way, my friend.
We are.
Okay, well, we are going to get into all the things that you mentioned, Chris, but before we do, I'll just do a quick bit of housekeeping and remind everybody to go to haulinassetsllc.com for full show notes, and please find us on Facebook to make comments, get in touch with us, rate and review the show wherever you listen to it. Chris, let's get into the topic at hand.
Great. So today we're relaunching the podcast, and we're going to revamp it and try to make it so that it's better than ever. It's a little bit more entertaining, just a whole bunch of changes. But one of the really big refocuses as we do this is I want to get back to kind of more of our roots and really focus on the owner-operator. Even though Haulin Assets has grown and it's now a small fleet, our bread and butter and what we're all about is really helping people get into that owner-operator realm. And so we want to kind of refocus on that. And I think we're going to do a lot of good things in the near future that's going to help us do that.
This is what has been on my mind for a little while, is that I think what we've talked about, say for the last, 2-3 years, maybe a little more, has been a lot of the business focus on the ownership side, which I think is really valuable for a certain listener who wants to get past that owner-operator phase and start building a fleet, even if it's a small one. So I guess my point is, don't get me wrong, I think that's valuable stuff. But I think, we drifted away from the owner-operator mentality, and I'm excited to get back to it. But, Chris, you made promises that we can't necessarily keep. You said we're going to be more entertaining. I don't think that's up to us.
That's your job. I'm the boring, accountant, textbook, Excel spreadsheet guy. So this is going to be all on your shoulders.
Really what it's going to come down to is me making fun of you as often as possible for spreadsheets.
I'm okay with that. I can live with that.
So, Chris, maybe we start a lot of this by digging into why you started the podcast, and where your mindset was when you started it, and how we've drifted in good ways and bad, and what you want to get back to.
Oh, that's a great idea. I've always been fascinated by owner-operators. When you look up the definition of owner-operators in the dictionary, or if you Google it, I'm going to read. I Googled it, and this is the definition it came up with: a self-employed commercial truck driver who owns and leases their own equipment and manages their own business. And one of the things, I really like that phrase or that word owner-operator, because I think it encapsulates so well what it actually means. Because as that definition I just read says, you've got the owner who is also an operator, the owner who runs a business just like any other business owner, but is also the driver or operator of a commercial vehicle. And I think we've done pretty well over the last 7 years. And, especially like you said, in the last, 3 or 4, we've really been focusing a lot on the business, the owner side. I want to expand that and also include the driver side, because it's really such a critical piece of that owner-operator. That's honestly, you probably spend 80% of your time as an owner-operator on that operator side, putting that operator hat on versus the owner side. And so, let's also talk about some things and do some things that, are some of the more entertaining pieces of being a driver, some of the funner things, more interesting things, and really focus on some other things that make your life better as an operator. And that's going to encompass a whole lot of things.
Yeah. Now, when you started the podcast, you were already the owner of Motor Carrier HQ, right? And we talk about this, or we at least mention this in almost every episode. MotorCarrierHQ.com, right? Yep. Sponsors the show. Well, that's the business that you started with. I kind of want to ask you about that, because one of the things that we have done for years and years is we've stayed away from talking too much about Motor Carrier HQ, in part because we don't want this show to just be a commercial for this, what would you call it, a trucking consultancy or something along those lines. But I think it's valuable for people to know what the business is, because that fed into why you started Haulin Assets as a company and a podcast in the first place, right?
Yeah. And so Motor Carrier HQ, if you don't know, if you've never listened to the podcast before, or you haven't heard some of the earlier ones especially, one of the things that I've done at Motor Carrier HQ for years and years and years is help people, go from being a driver to starting their own trucking company. But Motor Carrier HQ prior had really just kind of focused on the mechanics of that, getting your licensing, getting your registration, getting a business set up, the structure, the organization of it, and just, physically making it possible to be an owner operator. But we never really dove in or would help out with the business side. And over the years, I'd see, drivers come in, leave our door, being an owner operator, helping them on that path. But we'd kind of help them just kind of get started on it, right? And then just kind of send them off. And some drivers, owner operators, would do very well. They'd figure it out and they'd be successful at it. But far too often, any business is tough. Trucking's especially tough. And despite, some people's best efforts, they would fail and the business wouldn't pan out. And most of the time when I saw that happening is just because people did not understand how to run a business. They'd never seen the curtains opened to, what the backside of being a trucking company is, and just don't know how to do that. And so I thought, maybe the best way to teach people how to be a good owner operator is I'll go out, I'll get a CDL. I'd never driven a truck before. And I will start my own trucking company. I'll get in the seat and I'll drive for a year. And so that's kind of that was the idea. I had that idea for quite a while. 2019, I pulled the trigger early in the year. I went out and got a CDL, and it's, that's where that got it all started.
For those who are new to the show, go check out it would have been about 30 or 40 episodes that encompass that first year of yours on the road, something like that. Yeah. And I'd say those are incredibly valuable episodes. Front to back, every one of those that we did covers some good ground. So we're probably not going to go back and do it as the jets fly overhead. I know these new mics are going to pick that up. But we're probably not going to go back and redo those episodes in the same way that we did. But we are likely going to cover some of the same territory in new ways as we move forward. But I would still encourage people, if you're new to the show, to go back and check out those first episodes. It was pre-COVID for the most part. And so the world looked a little different, but the principles that we talked about remain very much applicable to somebody starting a company now, right?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, 11 of the 12 months that I drove were all pre-COVID.
Right.
The last month that I drove was when kind of the world was starting to shut down and things got incredibly crazy. And so, and in all honesty, like the pre-COVID market is, I feel like, more of what the market's been over the last several years, and where it's been a really tough market. And so it's going to be interesting as we kind of go forward to kind of do some comparisons between now and that time.
So you drove for about a year, and then after that year mark, you hired your first driver, right? And that began the process of fleet building, where you stepped away from behind the wheel, and the show took on a slightly different focus as well, right? Am I getting my timeline right?
Yep.
Okay, so what happened then? So you hired a driver, and then where
that
did
was
your
early.
go?
That was like May of 2020. And then the very end of 2020 is when we added our second truck. And then shortly after that, in early 2021, is when we brought on Nate as a business partner. Because I was kind of at a point in that world, in that time of my life, where I just didn't have the time to dedicate to Haulin Assets. If we wanted it to really grow, like somebody else was going to have to be heavily involved with that. And I felt like the best way to do that at that point was to bring on a partner. So partnered with Nate, and we kind of grew pretty quick for the first 3 years. We went from essentially one truck to 11 trucks in a fairly short period of time.
It was like a year and a half, something kind of absurd.
It was a little bit absurd.
If you already have 200 trucks in your fleet and you add 10 more, percentage-wise, that's not a big deal. But going from 1 to 11 in less than 24 months was an absurd rate of growth. And that was COVID-driven, right? Things hit a brick wall after a year or two out from COVID, but that first little bit, it was like trucking nirvana, Xanadu.
Yep.
So anyway, okay. So what happened after that? Grew like crazy, and then hit that brick wall, and then what? Survival mode. Just don't die.
The freight market in early 2022 just kind of started to tank, and in reality, it tanked all through 2022, all through 2023, all through 2024, and then 2025, and maybe even part of 2024. I feel like it just kind of held steady at the bottom. It hasn't really been decreasing. It definitely hasn't been increasing much. Maybe a little bit in 2025. But yeah, we've really been in survival mode, as I think most trucking companies have been.
Yeah, absolutely. So now that we've done about 10 minutes on getting us up to the present moment, that's about where we are now. We're going to be talking, I think, in the next episode about some financials and the current state of things, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about changes with the podcast,
Mm-hmm.
Some of the lessons that I've learned.
Yeah.
Some things that surprised me over this time period. So yeah, we're going to talk a little bit more about that.
Okay. Well, let's get into some of the stuff that you learned then. I guess I just wanted to tease that for all the survival mode stuff that's been going on, and there was the big wreck that you talked about in the last episode, and it's just one thing after another. And then from what you were telling me this last month in January, we don't have the finalized numbers yet, but things are looking pretty good compared to where things were at. So it's another one of those fingers crossed, please be turning around economy moments, right?
Yep.
Or at least freight market.
Yeah.
So we'll get more in depth with all of that maybe in later episodes. But for this one, let's talk about the lessons that you learned, both behind the wheel and from growing the fleet in such a short time and going into survival mode. Take us where you want with that sort of thing.
So I kind of want to go over three things that, three experiences I had in the trucking company that have kind of helped shape me into the fleet owner that I am today. And some things that have kind of helped make me think a little bit. One of them is that this lesson is you don't know what you don't know. And, this is kind of a, dumb Chris moment. My very first load. So I got my CDL going through a truck driving school. And in reality, the truck driving school teaches you just enough so that you can drive and operate your vehicle, safely as a rookie, right? You're a rookie, so you're still there. You don't have a whole lot of experience, but they get you to that certain level of competency. You can back the truck, you can drive down the road safely, and that's kind of where it's at. They don't teach you anything else. And most drivers at that point then go work for another fleet that finishes off your training. Well, not Chris. Chris goes and starts his own trucking company and doesn't get that additional layer of training. And so I show up at my very first appointment, and you get in there, like, I don't even know what I'm doing. And luckily at that point, I had a dispatcher, Jake. We talk about him a lot in the early years. And so I have to call Jake and okay, what do I, he has to walk me through, okay, now you go check in, you go find where the shipper and receiver says to go. So I go do that, and I check in, and they give me this sheet of instructions where I'm going to get loaded. And one of the things is you've got to slide your tandems all the way back. And I'm like,
that just sounds filthy dirty if you don't know what that means. Like, hey, I'm not sliding anybody's tandems here. Okay,
yeah, you got a point there. My mind didn't go there the first time, like yours does. So I guess I'm not as dirty as you. But anyway, I'm like, what is this sliding my tandems? What do I have to do here? So like I'm panicking. I have no idea what they're talking about. And so I call up Jake again. I'm like, hey, the instructions say I've got to slide my tandems. What's that? And like Jake busts up laughing. He's like, hey, this guy's an idiot. But okay, I'll be nice about it. I'm sure he came across very nice, but I'm sure he's thinking in his mind, man, what have I gotten myself into? So he kind of walks me through, sliding your tandems is that the set of wheels on the trailer can slide forward and back to adjust weights. And when you load, a lot of times shippers require you have, or unload, they require you to have them all the way to the back because it makes it easier for a forklift to get on and off the trailer, and there's not as much bouncing around. So he had to walk me through how to do that. It's a fairly easy process, but
well, unless you don't know
unless
what it
you
is.
have absolutely no idea what's going on.
But I think this is huge. And I just mentioned earlier about how we don't want to make this a commercial for Motor Carrier HQ. But I will say this: whether it's MCHQ or somebody like them, if you want to start a trucking company, getting a consultant like that, or finding a mentor who can take you, show you the ropes, it's huge for stuff like that. Another group that I work with often is dentists who start or purchase businesses. And it's hilarious to see the ones who think they know exactly how it's going to go and what they need to do. And it's like, you have no clue. Yeah. You think you can do this without an attorney, without a CPA, without a consultant. Like, good luck. Maybe you'll make it. Probably won't. And it's a similar story here where it's like, yeah, if you're thinking about starting your own trucking company, you better have a Jake, or even better, somebody who is actually being paid to help you with those sorts of things, right?
Absolutely. And Jake he was my dispatcher. So he was getting paid. So it was incentivizing for him to make sure I was successful, which helped a ton. And so, that lesson learned is you don't know what you don't know. Some ways that you can overcome that is by having a team, somebody that's an expert that's been there and done that can help you through the process. And I think that's key to being successful as an owner operator, is if you've got, for lack of a better way of putting it, a mentor, somebody that can that's been there, that you can bounce ideas off of, ask questions to, that kind of thing is super invaluable. It's not absolutely 100% necessary, but if you've got it, it significantly increases your chance of being successful. If you don't have that, you just have to always be thinking about what possibly could be coming down the road next. How am I going to solve that? You've got to have some pretty good critical thinking skills, analytical skills, and really be able to kind of think forward. And that can help you get past that you don't know what you don't know.
Well, and if you don't mind, before we get to the second thing you wanted to bring up, can I just throw another word in there, and that's humility? I think it can mess with a lot of people where, and look, I'm as guilty of this as the next guy. You hate to look stupid. And so somebody says you got to slide your tandems, and you're like, I know I'm supposed to know what that means. And I'm terrified of looking stupid, so I'm not going to ask anybody until I break something and I have to, right? Ask first. It's okay. It's okay to not know what you don't know. Absolutely. And it's okay to ask for help.
It's okay sometimes to look a little stupid or feel a little stupid. That's how you learn. That's how you get better. And if you're afraid to do that, you're never going to put yourself out there. You're never going to take any risks. And that's a worse position to be in. So be humble, be willing to realize you don't know everything, and sometimes ask for help. Another area where this is so prevalent is backing up. You back up a semi-truck. Sometimes you need somebody to help you and kind of guide you so that you can hit that dock just right. Like, never be afraid to ask for some help in tight situations. That's way better of, kind of being humble, even though you may have been driving for years, asking for that help so you don't hit anything. Humility is huge.
Lesson number 2, what you got?
So lesson number 2 is you can't control everything, and you've got to focus on what you can control. A good example of where I kind of really learned this lesson, again, on kind of that very first trip. The first load I ever took me from Salt Lake down to Dallas, Texas. And then I came back. On my way back, I was driving early in the morning. When I say early, like probably 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. And I was driving between Cortez, or actually Monticello, Utah, and Moab, Utah. 2-lane road, super dark, and a deer ran out. And I'm going to say, like, I stick to my guns on this one. The deer hit me. I did not hit the deer.
Well, because wasn't it the part of the truck that got all bent up was on the side of it,
the impact
right?
was right below the driver's window. So that's why I can say that. Like, I didn't hit it with the front of the truck. It literally ran into the side of the truck.
Watch you justify hitting poor little deer.
And could I control that? I can't control what the deer does. No. But there are things that you can control. And even in this kind of example, there's things that I probably could have done that would have lessened the likelihood of that happening, including not driving on a dark road like that at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. If I could have adjusted my schedule a little bit so that I was driving when it was light, I would have been able to see that deer a lot sooner, or more likely than not, the deer would have been, tucked away for the day and never would have even crossed the road.
Yeah. Can I share one of my favorite lessons? This is one that has stuck with me for over 6 years now. Along these lines is, okay, so you can't control what you can't control. For example, getting inspected, right? You don't know when or why or how you're going to get inspected, but you know that it'll happen at some point, and you know that it's going to be more likely if you do certain things with your truck. And I always remember the lights. You talked about, hey, if you trick out your rig with tons of, what do you call it, the Christmas tree?
The Christmas tree
driving down the road. If you're doing that, then you're increasing the likelihood of failing an inspection. Yep. Because if one of those lights is out, even if it's not technically necessary to have all the running lights, if one of them is out, you fail that part of the inspection, right? Am I getting this right?
Absolutely.
And so this would be a great example of, look, you may not be able to control getting inspected, but it's going to be a lot easier to control the results of those inspections if you don't do dumb stuff beforehand.
That's an awesome example of that.
Okay, so what's lesson number 3?
So lesson number 3 is just the year that I spent driving on the road completely opened my eyes to the challenges of owning a trucking company. It's made me a better business owner in all my other businesses that support the trucking industry. It's helped me be more compassionate and understanding towards our drivers, understanding what those realities of life is like on the road. And so just having spent that year on the road was invaluable in so many different ways.
Okay, so let's see. Give me some examples of lessons that you may have learned while you were driving that then somebody else came to you and said, hey, I ran into this problem. You go, oh yeah, I know what that's like. Any examples pop into mind?
Just some of the challenges with dealing with brokers, for instance, understanding how a lot of the times a broker or shipper or receiver just is not going to take into account or consider your difficulties in arriving at appointments or getting back from appointments or just anything. There's so much that you can't control, and brokers and shippers are a big part of that. So having dealt with them firsthand as a driver, understanding how they operate has then helped me make better decisions on what brokers we work with, and how we deal with them when certain situations arise. That's definitely been something that made a big impact on how I work today.
Yeah. Well, we're going to be carrying all this forward into future episodes. One of the changes that I know we want to make, not that this was often a huge issue, the length of our episodes, but we do want to keep them manageable, right? Bite-sized. And so let's try to keep this to 30 minutes or less. Hey, Chris?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so with that in mind, what can listeners expect more of? We talked a little bit about this, but let's break it down. What is Haulin Assets 2.0? What are we going to be doing?
Probably a little bit less on the business side, although we're still going to have a business focus there. But I really want to focus a lot more on what life is like on the road. And one of those things that we want to do is we want to bring the audience into it a little bit more and make the audience, a little bit more active participants in that. So, with the end of every episode, we want to do kind of a story about life on the road, whether it's something that's happened with me or within my fleet, or something that's happened to a listener where we can, give a shout out to a listener and go through kind of one of their experiences, share those across the board. Just a lot of what that life as a trucker is like and how we can make it better for everybody.
Love it. Well, Chris, let's do some final thoughts and a little bit more housekeeping, and then people can stick around for a little story from life on the road. All right. But what final thoughts for this episode do you want to leave people with?
If you've been with us since episode 1, first, thank you very much. It's been great, a great journey and a great ride. If you're new to the podcast, now is a perfect time to jump in, because we're going to be, talking about some of the things that we've been doing. And this relaunch, I think, is going to be, make the podcast even better. And kind of like I just mentioned, we want to hear about your experiences on the road. So make sure you're following us on Facebook, you're following us on Instagram or any of our social media platforms, and share some of those. If you've got an experience that you'd like to see highlighted on the podcast, let us know on social media, reach out to us, and we will get with you and hopefully start sharing some more of those stories on the road.
Yeah, wonderful. This is up to now been the story of how Chris got from where he was to where he is, but this new Haulin Assets 2.0 is going to be your story and everybody else's. We want to expand beyond just your experiences and hear about everybody else as well.
Yep.
Okay. Chris, before we go, I'll remind everybody of what I did up at the top of the episode. HaulinAssetsLLC.com, Facebook, Instagram, and I'm going to throw Spotify in there as well, are great places for you to go share your comments, share your stories, make requests of topics or questions that you want us to address. So all of those places are great. And as we get started with this relaunch, this rebrand, we would appreciate your help a ton. If you just go leave a review, if you want to go the extra mile, actually write a short review and tell people what an amazing and good-looking individual I am and how lucky Chris is to have me on the show. But if you can't do that, at least just hit the 5-star button. That goes a long way to tripping the algorithm to get us in front of more people who may appreciate content like ours. All right, I think that's all the housekeeping. So, Chris, thanks for coming, and let's do a little outro music and then tell a story, huh?
Sounds great.
All right. Chris, stories from the road. We used to do this right at the beginning of every episode, but I like it better at the end. I think this is going to be good. So let's, and I know we're pressed for time here. So what do you got?
And this isn't really a story 100% from on the road, because this happened more in my office. It involved a truck that was on the road. I got scammed out of $742 a few days ago.
Okay, when you say you got scammed, were there any Nigerian royalty involved?
No, I think I would have picked up on that. Like, I feel like I'm a pretty savvy person, and you hear about all these scams, and like I've never really felt like I've been tripped up by one. I got fooled on this one, and so I want to spread the message. We've already been posting stories about this on social media. If you're listening to this the first time, or if you've listened to it and you haven't done this, please go find the post and share it with as many people as you possibly can, because I want to get this message out there so what happened to me doesn't happen to anybody else.
And okay, so in short terms, what was the story? How'd you get scammed?
So I get a phone call from Nate, business partner. He says, "Hey, Larry, I've got an officer on the phone. Something's happened with Larry, driver in truck 3. So officer gets on and says, hey, I'm going to like shorten this quite a bit. Essentially, Larry had gotten in a fight. And what had happened though was, somebody had cut somebody off. The driver of the other truck that was a Snyder driver had gone and was belligerently banging on Larry's door. Larry like a road rage type thing. Larry finally came out and it ended up in a scuffle. Well, the police officer was right close in the area, came, and he said that Larry, he grabbed Larry by the shoulder and started to pull him away, and then Larry turned around and pushed the officer.
Oh,
so
this is true? This is actual, this happened? Or this is what's being told to you on the phone? This is what's
being told to us on the phone. So look, you got fooled too. It's not just me.
Well, I don't know Larry, but I could totally see him doing this, okay?
Well, so also as part of it, Larry had been spat on before. That's what kind of started the physical altercation.
Okay.
And the officer said, I could get him for physical assault on a police officer, but he and I had a conversation after things all calmed down. He didn't know I was a police officer when I reached behind him. It didn't go very far. As soon as he realized that I was a police officer, he backed off. And he said the other guy, like talking to witnesses, the other guy was 100% the instigator. So, but because of the situation, we've got to take Larry and book and release him. He's already on the way to the police station to have this happen with one of my colleagues, and the other guy's being taken to jail. But the truck stop where this happened at has a zero tolerance policy for this kind of thing. Both trucks are getting towed. and so he said, the tow truck company manager is here with me, coordinating all of that. They're hooking the other truck up to the tow truck right now. Your truck just left with another one of his drivers. He's actually just driving it to their yard. And so like I pull up the ELD at this point and look, and sure enough, Larry's truck is moving down the road like it's going to a impound yard. And the officer, like a little bit further on in the conversation, the officer says, if you want, I can have him take it to a travel plaza that's very close to the police station. So when we release Larry, I can just drive him over there and drop him off. And we're like, yeah, that's better than towing it to their impound yard or whatever. And, he's like, but in order to be able to do that, like I need to get payment and everything all straightened out and taken care of before we get any further. And so this is where the scam really comes in. Is this is not like out of the ordinary. Like every once in a while, we'll have a situation where a truck needs to be towed and it's involved, the police officer has been involved. So like this is a situation, not a fight, but a similar situation that we've ran into before. So it's not unheard of to have to pay a tow company immediately over the phone. Mm. And so we ended up doing that. We got an express code and essentially paid the tow company the $742 bill. The story kind of keeps going for a little while. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, and wait, by the way, the other guy had punctured a hole in your tire and we had to replace the tire. That's another $900 something. And there were a few things, I can't remember exactly what it was that kind of happened in this part of the strange. One, he said he stabbed it with a knife. Stabbing a semi-truck tire with a knife is really, really hard to do.
Well, that, and also the story would have taken on a much darker turn if a knife was involved.
Yeah.
And this isn't like, hey, a little altercation, somebody got pushed. Like, no, somebody pulled a freaking knife.
Yeah. So at this point, I'm like, there's a few things that are really starting to make me think like, what the heck's going on? So Nate's still talking to the officer on the phone. I go back to the ELD, truck's still driving down the road at this point. And I decide to like drive in a little bit more, and I go into the truck. I look at the history. He hasn't been to a truck stop since like early that morning. He's actually been driving that truck's been moving for 3 hours straight. Mm. And that's when I'm like, okay, something's way off here. The timeline of what's actually been happening with the truck is not matching up with the story the police officer is telling us. And so I mute myself on my cell phone. I pick up my office line and I call Larry. I'm like, and luckily he answered, even though that's not a phone number he's ever seen me call him on.
Yeah.
He answers. I'm like, hey, this is Chris. Have you been in a fight? And Larry's all like, what? Like, what are you talking about? I'm like, have you been in a fight today? He's like, no. And so like, I pretty quickly like talk through like, okay, you've been driving for like 3 hours straight. Is that right? Yeah. You haven't been in a fight at a truck stop? No. I'm like, okay, just a sec. I got something going on. I'll call you back later, and like hang up on him. So Larry's now all like, what the heck's going on? But I got off the phone. And then at that point I text Nate and I'm like, we're getting scammed.
Oh man.
And so that's kind of, that's the gist of what happened.
So be careful out there.
Be careful out there. Like I've never heard of that scam. I've never heard of anything like it. And I'm like, these guys were sophisticated. They were talking DOT regulations.
They knew
They knew their business. They knew what they were doing. They made it sound so legitimate. And so I just want everybody to be aware of that. Again, share this with as many people as you possibly can. I don't want another single person being taken advantage of by these crooked people.
Yeah. And you know what, Larry? If you do get in a fight, at least win. Okay?
Yeah. Well, apparently he was winning. So
well, there you go.
So good job, Larry.
Good story, Chris. All right, I'll see you next time.
See you.